Okay. Greensboro, Andrew Westmoreland, behind the gate. Welcome to episode 16. I've got my good friend, an incredibly smart and handsome mortgage professional, Scott Shubert, here with me. I was going to make him episode 1, but we decided we would push him to episode 16. So anyway, Scott, thanks for being here, buddy.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Let's get right into it. New Jersey dude, you went to Ohio State. Good year to be a Buckeye.
It is a good year.
Yeah. How's that feel, by the way?
Feels really good.
Yeah, that's all you got to say about that? You just won the national championship. You're like, he seems like a nice guy.
I think I'll be good for 3 years. They could stink for 2 years, and I'd still be happy.
Well, congratulations. I was pulling for Notre Dame, believe it or not.
That's okay. I'll forgive you.
For some reason, like Riley Leonard was the decision maker there. I hated playing against him when he was at Duke as a Carolina fan. And I don't know why. I just liked him through the playoffs. I thought he had a good message, and I was pulling for him.
He laid it all out in that first drive.
Yeah.
And then he could not sustain it. So,
well, you guys on paper should have. You were the best team in the country on paper.
Absolutely.
So the right team won. Anyway, so Jersey dude, Ohio State, go Buckeyes. North Carolina. Let's talk about how you got down here, what brought you down here, and let's roll with that first.
So I grew up in northern New Jersey. Went to Vernon Township High School, very rural part of New Jersey. Most people think New Jersey, they think like Newark or, it's the scene in The Sopranos, but, it's called the Garden State for a reason. Where I lived was very rural, class of 315 or so. Graduated top 10%, went to Ohio State, was on the basketball team, was on the golf team, not because I was good, because they needed 12 kids and I was number 10. Did get a lot better through the years, but went to Ohio State and then met my now wife, Tammy, and we moved down to North Carolina in 1996, and the rest is history.
When you originally moved down here, was it Greensboro?
It was, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we moved. My father had moved here while I was in school, and then he told me about the wonderful job opportunities that were here, and I think he lied just to get me down here, and but it's all good.
What was that first wonderful job opportunity?
So my father had a landscape business, which I had also, through latter parts of high school, and then when I was back in college, that I never like worked at a company or or bussing tables or anything, but it was basically cut lawns type thing. And then so I did that for a little bit, and then I actually got a job in the mailroom of a publishing company here in town. And then for years after that, I chose the movies for US Airways. So that is an actual job, and so that
watch movies and like that seems appropriate for the airplane.
Pretty much. So
did you ever try to mess with people? Just be like, let's just throw this one in there.
As a young family man needing to earn a paycheck, they would have frowned upon that. So we didn't do too much messing around there.
I got you. Cool. So you move into North Carolina in 1996. We're watching videos. We're putting them on airplanes. At what point did you realize you were a Southerner?
So the funny story is when I started in that role, the couple of, we'll say older gentlemen, basically you always used to tell everyone every chance they could, the only thing we can find wrong with him is that he's a Yankee.
That was it.
that was it. So it's funny too. I don't know, the perceptions that you have. I think a lot of how you're raised is what you think, So this is the longest place I've ever lived, but it's funny, the perception of whether most people from here would still not consider me a Southerner.
Yeah. I mean, you got some twang here and there.
It comes
out. Yeah,
a little bit here and there.
Yeah.
And then there's some Jersey that comes out too.
I was about to say, but to your point, when people hear Jersey, like ever since Jersey Shore, which I don't even remember when that came out, it's just very like,
it's
Jersey.
Well, it's all very over the top. A lot of that. And that's just usually, like in most places, the representations are an over-the-top version of what actually occurs. But
On that note, do you feel like you took a lot more Jaeger bombs in your life because you were from New Jersey? Is that a thing?
I was not extremely popular, and was bullied a little bit. So I was not until very late in my high school life. I was not part of the in party scene. So that's
so we're just not sure about.
No, that wasn't it. That wasn't big on my priority list.
I got you. Okay. On the southern note, do you remember the first time you got excited about a Bojangles biscuit?
The first time I got excited about it was actually last week.
No shit, really? Well, I got to hear about this. I was hoping 1996
Right.
when we moved here, but last week. All
Last
right.
week, my son had ACL surgery, and he was laid up in bed for a little bit, and I turned into his personal food Uber. So it's Uber Eats, and it was just Dad Eats instead. So I got him what he wanted, and then I actually learned that, oh my gosh, they really do have it all day.
Yeah.
So it's awesome.
What'd you get? What were you excited
Just
about?
the standard. You got to go with the old school bacon, egg, and cheese. You got to.
Have you ever had their Cajun filet biscuit, add egg and cheese?
I have not. Might have to try that.
Yeah. And for those who may partake in the Jaeger bombs a little heavily, a Cajun filet biscuit with egg and cheese with a large bow round or seasoned fry, if you're into that, and a large Mountain Dew is
as a cure.
It's like an IV bag. It just gets you right back going. I've had too many of them in my day. All right, before we move on from the southern, because I love this, 3 phrases when you moved down here that just kind of made you go like, WT, what? What did they just say? Like, my wife laughs at me because, and I don't know that this is southern, but early in our relationship, I'd say shit like, well, between me, you, and the fence post. And she's like, what are you talking about? So what are 3 things you remember hearing like that?
The classic, I'm fixing to do this. Whatever this is, I'm fixing to go to the store.
How do you spell fixin' in that?
I would FIXIN single apostrophe. I think that is the correct grammatical QWERTY keyboard version of how to spell that.
Did you mean to bring number 1 back to Bojangles since their sides are technically called fixins?
Maybe the subconscious is there.
It's great pun, Scott. Number 2.
Number 2 would be maybe not a phrase, but just an activity of, if under threat of snow, you must drive to the store and buy milk and bread, whether your house is full of it or not. And then I think really just the honestly just the disdain for Northerners.
Really?
Yeah. With some folk that ran deep.
Just like immediately. So where are you from? I'm from New Jersey. Get out of my house right now.
It was just like you're from there. That kind of that kind of thing. More of a. It's like. It wasn't mean. It wasn't like a problem, but you knew deep down they meant it.
Yeah. It's like, they probably gave you one of those classic lines like, oh, bless your heart. It's like, you come to find out.
You learn what that means over time. Eventually you will learn what that means, whether it's directed at you or around you. You figure out what that is.
All right, Scott. So growing up, you just mentioned maybe not quite being in the in crowds and, maybe potentially had run into some bullying at times. Let's talk about that a little bit, kind of how you overcame that part of your life, and feel free to include any messages for somebody who may be going through something similar.
Sure. I think in a lot of times, as kids, let's face it, a lot kids will be kids, and a lot of times, that encompasses, you're making fun of your buddies and all that kind of stuff. And then, there's just different times where, kids that might be an easy target, or, it can get out of hand a little bit. Luckily I was at an age where it was not in the digital age where, I knew if I got out of school, like it was going to be over. But, also, if just because someone's a little bit different, or maybe they don't seem as cool as you, it doesn't mean that it gives you a right as a person to lash out at that person. Most times people are, if they are if they are bullying somebody, there's usually other underlying things that are going on that are causing that to happen. But, because it does, when that happens to you, it can create some long lasting effects that you don't know how that's going to really damage somebody in the long run. I was fortunate, I think when I was at Ohio State, I took Taekwondo as a class. And so they had Taekwondo 1 and Taekwondo 2, which I took both of. So getting into martial arts was actually very helpful. Luckily I got hooked up with one of the other students there, but was a high-ranking black belt in his own. He had been doing it basically his whole life, and he started a club, and I got hooked into that. And so it was a very small club at first, and so I was able to get a lot of individual attention, and able to grow in that from an ability standpoint, and then, but really something along those lines that that gives you structure, it gives you confidence, and really all of these things really pushed me forward into who a lot of who I am today.
Yeah. Do you feel like the martial arts kind of helped you build some confidence around yourself in that group? And
so I think whenever and it's not the fighting, although like learning how to defend yourself certainly helps. If you were, I was a skinny kid, so
Scott, you're still skinny.
Well, skinny's relative, I suppose. But you're
the skinniest one in this conversation.
If you can't defend yourself, that's really where a lot of your angst comes in to play. So when you learn that skill, it does not mean it gives, again, you the right to turn around and use those skills for harm. Yeah. Right. Martial arts is a defense predominantly, but the rest of that is just, like the character building of a martial art. It's not just that. You learn so much more. It gives you community. It gives you, an identity, and it gives you an ability to, I think, just look at things a little bit, differently when you're going through life.
Yeah, and something you said, I appreciate your approach. You didn't really say anything bad about somebody who may have been bad to you. You seek to understand in that situation, and I think as a community, like, obviously we don't want our children to be bullied and ever feel that way, and I would hate for my son to come home and have a bad experience because somebody was making him feel bad. And I think it's super empathetic of you to look back on that other person and say, hey, we don't know what that person was going through either, to put them to that, right?
Sure. And I'd say it took me a long time to get to that point. The gaining confidence through martial arts was one thing. Most of my life I was an atheist. But as I started, that's, honestly, that's full circle. You said, what's some of the Southern things that you hear? Usually what you hear is, great, you're here. What church you go to? Right. And so it's a very common thing if, people are warm and inviting and, want you to come to their church and things like that. So at first I was pretty, hands up about, that, and I was kind about it, but I didn't really think too much of it. Some point along the line, I think most of us are searching for something. We just don't always define what that is, or we don't know what that is. I decided that I had not ever really explored what believing in God meant, and so I did a loan for a pastor. He invited me to church, and he was a pretty cool dude. And I didn't think pastors could be cool dudes, so I decided to check out his church. And it was funny because right along the line there, they really hit on some of the common topics that kind of keep people away from church. tithing. All the church wants is my money, or, different things like that. And they really had, a way of talking about that wasn't in a negative light. It was, hey, if this isn't your church home, we don't want your money. And I was like, what are you talking about? They talked about doubt and saying how doubt was good. Like, it's okay to, as you're exploring your faith, to doubt certain things. That's normal. I mean, it was like they were speaking right to me. Yeah. So as I grew in that process, coming to faith allowed me to forgive those that had wronged me in a way that I don't think I would have otherwise.
So you think you attribute that empathy, that portion of your thinking back on that part of life, like you bring that back to your faith? You think,
I do.
You think without that you would have ever really been able to forgive or have that mentality?
I don't think that I would have had the mindset to do it. It's not, I mean, you could read a meme and say we're supposed to forgive people, and you do it because you read it. But the truth is in the desire to forgive those that have wronged you, even if they don't see. And this is the hardest thing when it comes to faith, is forgiving people that never asked for it. Like I haven't anybody that I'm referencing. I mean, we're talking about 35 years ago, right? I haven't spoken to any of them, nor do I expect to, and nor do I need to, because I've been able to. I'm not looking for. I don't need closure. I'm not looking for closure, and that I've gotten that a long time because I've been able to forgive because I mean, honestly, my faith demands me to. Yeah. It is the way.
No, I love that. And little personal story here. I don't talk about my faith often, and I grew up in my grandfather was Presbyterian. My mom's side of the family went to a little small church down in Gibsonville near the softball field. That's how I remember its location. Right. Watching Mama pitch. I think she pitched until she was like 80. Like, it was crazy. She's just on anyway. And then, with my Mama Kay, who you've met before, yep. She was Baptist, which is full circle. My son goes to the daycare now at Friendly Baptist, where I used to help her do Sunday school classes. So it was a part of my life. But my dad, kind of opposite of you, grew up that way. And then when he went to App State, I think it was a professor that just kind of spoke on maybe some of your earlier beliefs. And, I never really talked to my dad about this.
Sure.
So I'm kind of speaking out of what I felt, not necessarily what he said.
Sure.
But he kind of moved away from religion. So my brother and I, being in that household, we went to church with our grandparents and families, but it was never talked about outside of that. It was never brought up in the home. We knew about religion and church from what we heard from outside. And so it was never a huge part of my life. I always had a sense of, I feel this way, or I believe in spiritual connections, and that's an important part of life and whatnot. And I'll say kind of a defining moment for me, and I still keep a lot of this very close to me. So this is a very vulnerable statement. One of the more powerful moments in my life around faith was with you. And, I don't want to get all emotional here, but, when things were going south with my dad, you said a prayer for him. And, it meant a lot to me as a friend, but it really meant a lot to me on a bigger level. And it just was a powerful experience for me with you sharing your faith with me. And I'll always love you for that. Right. All right. Okay. All right. Cool. So,
but funny story on that part.
Yeah.
That was, if you recall, that was the first lesson I taught myself when praying for someone while driving a car. Do not close your eyes and bow your head. I almost crashed.
Yeah. I do remember that. Yes. We it's going to bring some humor back. But anyway, I'll always love you for that. And it's refreshing to speak on that, because I feel like faith has become a little taboo at times. And
it's one of those things where you can be over the top, you can be off-putting when speaking about your faith, but that does not mean that you should shy away from it. For example, bringing it back to congratulating the Ohio State Buckeyes, the proudest thing that I am of being a Buckeye was before this even started, and you can Google this and find the articles and whatnot, but they held right in the center of campus in the Oval, the football team held a revival where, they had a stage and some of the players were preaching, and they wound up, there was such a huge crowd that they drew, not probably at first because they were football players, but they used their platform as football players to talk about Jesus and their faith. And I can't remember the number, but I think they did over 100 baptisms right then and there of people that came to Christ, listening to them speak. And it was boldness and not being afraid to talk about your faith in a way that, is in lots of ways unheard of, today. And so, I commend them for having the ability to speak on that, in that fashion.
Yeah. And I, in a world where that may not be what was highlighted around the national championship game.
Right. Or cliche, like, you think about how many of those guys, thank Jesus as part of their congratulatory. And it wasn't just them, because Notre Dame, there was several guys that were doing the exact same thing. So it's like, sometimes you get into a position where you're strong enough in your faith and you're strong enough in your position where even if you lose a couple of people because they don't like that you're talking about it, that's okay.
Yeah.
Because you weren't afraid to speak what you knew the truth was.
Well, I feel like ESPN and some of the media outlets did a good job covering that. I thought they did shed some light on that. Maybe not as much as some would have liked, but that's a feel good story. That's when I'm watching the media, like, God, that's the kind of stuff I want to personally hear. Like, we see these kids out, and they're just kids. Like,
sure.
They really are. We see these kids out here busting their tail, and I understand we're in a pivotal moment with college sports and with the nil and the money.
Sure.
There's a way that it can go that's bad for the sport, and there's a lot of positive too. But everything you see around professional sports tends to be who messed up, who did this, who's getting fired, why is this not going the way it is. So to just see a like uplifting story of just kids going out and using their platform to speak about what they were passionate about, and in that light, I thought it was I'm glad you brought that up, because I really thought that was a good story. And kudos to those kids, athletes at a huge university,
just having
putting themselves out there like
right.
that.
And we're called to share. If you believe, you're called to share the word, but most people, but it's it's difficult to do. It's a difficult task, because you're afraid you're not going to say the right things, and you're afraid. So just like bringing up from a business perspective as well, it's like, well, if you do something, doing it is more important than trying to do it. Not doing it because you don't think you can do it perfectly.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe the guy said the right words. Maybe they didn't quite say it all correctly, but they said it.
Yeah.
And so that's again, kudos to them.
Well, one of my favorite quotes is, I might butcher this, but don't let perfection get in the way of good.
Yep.
Right. Maybe that's not exactly how that's quoted, but you get the point. And then also, it's like you tie that back into the business, right? Mortgage lender, real estate agent. And this is the sad part about that. There's truth to this. This could sound controversial. Somebody might be like, oh, whatever. But when you are speaking to somebody you don't know about your faith, about the mortgage industry, me about the real estate community, or anything else that I'm passionate about, I feel like in the world of social media and where we're at with the media, you're only as good as the worst person doing it, right? And what I mean by that is is if somebody's gotten a loan before and that mortgage officer, that mortgage lender, that bank, internet company, whoever it may be, did a terrible job. Maybe they didn't get him in the house. Maybe they lost him money. Maybe they just didn't communicate well. The next time they talk to a mortgage broker like yourself, who I think is just fantastic at what they do, they're already going to walk into that situation.
They're going to walk in jaded. They're going to walk in with a bad, they've already painted you with a brush, with somebody else's brush because they didn't have a good situation. So, so we always do, for that very reason, and self-preservation, right? We try to think of everything we can to not create a situation like that for a client.
Yeah.
You can't have a day off. You can't take a file off and say, that guy, we'll just do the pre-approval letter. He'll be good. It's like you've got to do the work. You've got to make sure that you're doing everything the right way. Otherwise, and communicate clearly. Otherwise, you can put someone in our lines of work. You can put someone in a bad situation fast.
Agreed. Mortgage industry. Scott Shubert, who I will scream this from the mountaintop, and I've got a lot of other friends in the industry that are mortgage lenders, and I am by no means not saying they are capable of being in fantastic mortgage people. So please don't hear that. But I will scream from the mountaintop that in my 12 years of real estate, I have not sat down, done business with an individual that is all-encompassing knowledge in the mortgage industry and has helped me elevate my business just being in the same room with you. So thank you for all that. But mortgage industry, you got started in what year?
I started in the industry in 2003.
Here in Greensboro?
In Greensboro.
Okay.
I started originating in 2006, and then Tammy and I opened up our branch for Benchmark Mortgage in 2009.
So I want to spend more time on Benchmark and how you opened that, but I do want to rewind to originating in 2006. You probably caught the tail end of a pretty exciting market.
So it was September of 2006 when I started that. And if you look at a chart in the housing industry, the home market did that. So it was a direct 45-degree angle going the wrong direction. So for the first probably 8 years of my career, I never knew what it was like to originate in a good market, in a good, in a good housing market.
Yeah.
So it was, when you don't know any better, it doesn't matter. You just put your head down and work, and you get it done. So
do you feel like starting in that portion? Well, it sounds like you started to see the downfall before the 2008, right? If you're going back to September of 2006.
Yes. So leading up to that, and it was approaching that time frame where it was getting harder, it was getting worse. I still, people, it's funny, because dialing it back, again, earlier, so 2001 was 9/11. The catastrophes there wrecked all markets. So interest rates dropped because of that, because of the recession that it created. And so starting out when I was, learning the ropes and processing and, from 2003 to 2006 and all the various levels of what I basically got to the point where Tammy and I were like, we can do this for ourselves, and so, but leading with that, interest rates were lower as a result. In this case, lower meant probably in the, let's call it mid fives, more than likely. And then as we went into, I still remember because it was that, I want to say it was October-ish of 2008. But interest rates had gone up to the high sixes. And I just remember that was starting to turn, business was slowing. And a lot of it had to do, I think, just with the overall market itself. And then after, and that's when the mortgage crash happened. And, home values started plummeting and actual purchases of homes went down. Now, so the real estate world got hammered in that fashion as mortgage originators, interest rates then came back down from there. So like we were doing a lot of refinances at that time. But nothing like what we saw after the pandemic, here when rates were down 2s and 3s, but that was the first, real ride, from that perspective.
So 2 things on that note. One, do you feel like starting in that, downfall made you a better mortgage lender because you could not rely on an up market for business? You had to be smarter, train more, be more knowledgeable, bring more value to set yourself apart, number one. And number two, in that facet, whether in that moment or right after, like what was that career defining moment where you knew like, I am where I need to be in this industry?
Yeah. So in those beginning stages, and I would say at the time, I probably didn't realize it because again, knowing how those charts looked, once I started, I didn't know that for years until I went back and looked at the chart. I'm like, oh, look at that. That's when it started, type thing. But, when we opened up Benchmark in 2009, Tammy and I had left where we were. It was better. It was becoming more difficult to be only a mortgage broker. So we had affiliated, we were looking for a correspondent lending relationship to, surround ourselves with. So we had looked at a couple different options and then we got hooked up with Benchmark. So we're a lender and a broker and all that kind of stuff. But I guess as, going from a captured environment where we were before to truly being on our own and then figuring, how you can build a business basically, from scratch. At that point, and you can support your family, and that's kind of what makes you realize, hey, yeah, I can do this.
Yeah. Do you remember when that moment was? Can you tie it down to an exact like client, loan, conference?
I would say it's probably in the mix of. In that when we first opened Benchmark, there was, it's not like I never worried about like, I probably should have been worried about whether we could pay our bills or not, but, but we were, as we started to grow the business and we were able to hire people to help, because when it was just the two of us, we would work on getting loans and then we would do those loans. So our business was pretty much like a roller coaster because we were working in the business, not, getting the deals as much. So when you get to the point where you can then hire, staff and, people to help you do all the things that you shouldn't be doing in our position. So I would say, probably in that 2010 timeframe was really when it was like, okay, because I remember we hired a friend of ours to be a processor, and she said she was concerned that she couldn't live up to our standard. I mean, she did, and she was, for while she worked with us, it was great, but it was, I don't know that I realized I had a standard to be lived up to at that point, just by doing what we're doing.
Scott, I still feel like I'm not to your standard sitting in this room with you. I was going to go the opposite direction with that and be like, what standard are you talking about? I'm just kidding. But no, I mean, that's true. Like, it sounds like early on in your career, you guys really found out who you were and people wanted to be involved in that. And they were worried that maybe they couldn't hit a standard. I want to touch on that. Let's talk about, you brought in the family aspect of it. We haven't really, or I haven't really mentioned Tammy very much, your lovely wife. And name drop, love Tammy. She's awesome. And she's been so good to us over the years too. And, with Matt and whatnot, like, where is Benchmark now? And I know that you've had a lot of heavy family influence in the growth in the business. And it speaks to me because, my grandfather, my dad worked for my grandfather. I worked for them for a little while. So it was kind of a little family thing. Talk on that a little bit.
Yeah. So at various levels. So, Tammy and I are both co-branch managers for the branch. I always joke, she's listed as the branch manager at the banking commission. So it wasn't enough for her to be the boss at home. I had to sign paperwork to make sure everyone knew that she was the boss everywhere. So
Smart man.
absolutely. But we, again, early on, we learned what we were good at and what we weren't good at. And so, Tammy takes care of a lot of the high level planning type stuff and makes sure it's kind of the glue for the operation. Whereas I'm, like handling the business of, the actual loans and, doing them from that perspective.
Okay.
Both of our kids have worked for us in the past, so as far as, that goes. And then my right-hand man, Matt, is my nephew. So that has his best friend came to work with us, again, shortly after the pandemic, brand new to the industry. And so, we were able to kind of teach him what we needed to teach him from a loan perspective. But, he brought a set of skills, completely different than anybody else that we had on the team, which, proved to be very good, from that perspective. And so that's, all of our immediate. We have some satellite employees and branches across up in Vermont and in Tennessee as well. But, all of our predominant, operations is all here in Greensboro.
And you're licensed to do mortgage business in how many states?
13 or 14.
Okay.
I can't remember. Yeah. Our industry is such that you have to be, our company is licensed in almost every state, but you individually have to be licensed in that state to conduct business. So we've got basically the entire Southeast covered from, Virginia all the way around north, south, all the way down Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, through to Texas, up, and then various states, of course, Ohio, and then for a couple of various reasons, Missouri and Idaho. But so
why not?
Yeah, well, it kind of.
I imagine that happened one day. Somebody called you and they were like, "So I got this buddy. He's going to be buying this big ranch up in Idaho. Do you got anybody up there? Well, when does he want to buy that?"
Well, ironically, it was because an investor we had worked with a bunch and he predominantly was buying in Florida, but he lives in Idaho, and he said that he wanted to start buying properties up there too. So we went ahead and got licensed. He said, "Will you get licensed for me here?" And we said, "Sure." So we did, and he's never bought in Idaho, but we had a client that was trying to buy in Tennessee, get a job offer, move into Idaho. So we're able to help this veteran client, move his family and all that kind of stuff. So
you're like, Idaho.
Funny you should ask.
Funny you should ask. Exactly. So Scott, you're not really one to talk about yourself much, but in the recent years, I remember celebrating a moment with you on the benchmark front, and it was a blue blazer type thing.
The blue jacket.
The blue jacket. My apologies. See, this is why I asked the question.
The blue blazer, wasn't he a wrestler?
I have no idea. I don't know. We'll fact check that.
I think that was Owen Hart. God rest his soul.
Yeah. So take me through that. That's a pretty prestigious award for your company.
For our company, yeah. They actually created that award in 2010, modeled after the Masters and the green jacket. So our company colors are blue. So they created this award, the blue jacket. They give out our core value awards and, a lot of that at our annual conferences and stuff like that. But, so it's funny. It's kind of one of those things where, that award goes to, the person that kind of embodies all of Benchmark's core values, to the highest degree. And so in the beginning, since they just created that award, there were a few people that were very logical to get it after a while. And so as an employee, as an originator, as a branch manager, it's like you grow to want that. You want to be recognized. Why, not so much like, why did he get it, not me type thing, but, again, who doesn't like to be recognized, right? From that perspective. So it's kind of funny where every year, we would look, and because Tammy and I are co-branch managers, we would see like, because they'd have the jacket, they bring it up, and it'd be like just one hanger, not two hangers. It'd be like, we're not winning. So it was kind of funny because there was we have some really good friends down in our Charleston, South Carolina branch that had won it, and there were another husband and wife team. So the year that we did win, and the year that we won it, I said the exact same thing to Tammy, but they tricked us because they put both jackets on one hanger. So it was kind of funny just seeing that.
That's awesome. So is that just a performance based, or it sounds like that's just kind of more of a who you are type reward?
Kinda, so it's like it's performance based in the sense of one of our core values is success. So, if you're like, you can't do 2 loans a month and win this award because you have to have some level of success to embody the total award. But it is not solely a, production based award. Like if you did the most loans in the company and that's all you did and you didn't embody the other avenues of that, then you wouldn't really be a candidate for that. So, our company has a big heart for veterans. We have that mindset of taking care of our clients to the utmost. And, really if you're a giver, and that's really, this life is built with givers and takers in this world. And, like those that give succeed the most. And so it's kind of how that shapes up a little bit.
Yeah. Completely switching gears on you. Before we get into a passion of yours, what mortgage myth? Like, I want you to just boom, blurt it out. I want it to be as raw as can be. What mortgage myth drives you absolutely freaking bonkers?
I would say that just the mortgage myth that everything has to be perfect in order to get a home.
Yeah.
Because some people think, oh, my credit's this, so I can't buy, or, I don't have enough money saved, and again, and yeah, all those things come into play, but you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have an 800 credit score and 25% down payment and everything be perfect. We help people that are credit bruised with little money out of pocket, all the time. And so, that's one big thing, I think, and then I guess just really just not understanding the process and how that it is a process, that it's not just like, I remember we did a consultation for someone recently and they were like, well, I can get a prequal. I should be able to get a prequal in 5 minutes, right? And it's like, well, you can, but it's probably not the best way to do it. So, I mean, that's probably the bigger, I don't know if myth is the right way, but it's probably, a big pet peeve where, folks that think they just want to get all I want's a letter. Well, there's just so much more to it than that.
Yeah.
But enough people will do business the way you need them to do it that, if people are looking for online lenders like that, we just hope that if they decide to go that direction, they don't lose $10,000 to due diligence money because they didn't do everything they were supposed to up front.
It happens. It happens. Wine. I'd say you're a wine guy. Is that
That's probably a fair assessment.
correct? Yeah. I remember one of my first bonding moments with old Team Shubes over there was a wine pairing that you and Tammy had put on for me and another individual at the table. And I knew nothing about wine. I still know nothing about wine other than I like to drink it at times. Right. So wine, how'd you get into that?
So when I was in college, one of the jobs that I had taken was at a wine bar. And so the guy that owned it was called Gentiles, the wine cellars. His name was Roger Gentile. His father had a store in towards downtown Columbus, and he had opened in one of the nicer areas. He had opened up this wine bar. He actually taught the wine class at Ohio State as well. So not only was it he could talk about wine, he could talk about the science of wine and the chemistry behind it and all that kind of stuff. So it was very, very knowledgeable, gained a lot of knowledge during that. And so in that learning process, it was just kind of cool. I mean, here I was, 21-year-old kid where most, people are pounding, Bud Ices and, trying to figure out what bottle of wine I want to buy next, type thing.
Bud Ices and Mad Dog 2020.
Yeah, exactly. So then when we moved here, I, again, looking for work, all that kind of stuff. That first job I had taken that I had mentioned earlier was started off as a temporary position. And that same time frame, I had went into what was at the time called the Wine Warehouse. And this was before Total Wine was here and all that. So it was a local shop. And he actually, when I was shopping, we just started talking. And when I mentioned that, who I had worked for before, he's like, if you work for Roger Gentile, you know a lot about wine. That was like, and it was like, shocked me that, because he was not only, this is what he's doing there, but prior he had done some like national distributing and things like that. So that was supposed to be a 2-month position, helping out just for the holidays. And I wound up doing that job every Saturday for 10 years, in addition to whatever job I was working otherwise. So I say I was a wine consultant. I mean, I worked in the retail shop, so it just kept me in the know for a while. And, it's just fun.
Nice. Personal, most overrated bottle of wine.
Personal, most overrated bottle of wine. Probably Opus One.
Opus One. Okay. And what, like at a restaurant, what's a bottle of Opus One cost typically?
At a restaurant, that'd be lots and lots of money, probably several $100s.
Okay.
But I mean, still very good, but just probably not for the price.
Yeah, I mean, if we ever thought Opus One was potentially going to be a sponsor, I guess we just ruined that.
Yeah, that's why I picked them. I didn't want to pick anybody that might.
Cool. Well, you didn't say one of my favorites, so that was fine. I was like, he's going to say my favorite wine. I know he's going to do it. I'm a big Camus fan. Obviously, everybody's heard of Camus, but
absolutely. Well, yeah. And I think and honestly, it's why I paused, because we love it, and it gets a lot of attention, but I don't think it's overrated. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's that's the difference. And so for me, whenever buying wine, whether it's just a bottle here or there or in bulk, if you're going to spend $20 on a bottle, I want it to drink like it should cost $30.
Yeah.
Or if you're going to buy $50, I don't want to buy a $50 bottle and it tastes like it should cost $20, just because of the name. And so some of that, but I mean, wine is such a living, breathing thing. It's and there's so many choices. It's very difficult to kind of know what you should be buying sometimes.
Yeah.
With that. So,
what was your most expensive bottle of wine you've ever drank? Retail.
So I would say, so it's hard at the time that I paid for it. It was probably $50. But I had held on to it and aged it over time. And so if I were to sell that at that point in time, it probably would have cost well over $300.
Okay.
So it's like one of those things where a wine that is kept well, and the scarcer, just like houses or anything, the scarcer something is, the more money it costs. So something you buy right off the bat, if it's meant to age and you've kept it for 8 years, 10 years, whatever it is, then it could be worth quite a bit more.
Yeah.
I'm much more, like I'm not a buyer and flipper and investor in wine. I'm a sharer of wine. I would rather experience that with, a quiet evening, at home, or sharing it with friends, as opposed to, like, oh, I'm going to buy this and sell it later. That's not, but one night I just remember we had several bottles like that with multiple friends, and we started adding up what we thought it was like. It got kind of crazy.
Wow. Speaking of that, wine with friends. There's a good story about a broker open house where there was a. We're not actually going to tell that story. I'm just messing with you. Woo! It was a good time. It was a great time, man. I tell you what. Pozos was the wine we had, and they've been on the show before. They're local wine owners out of Argentina. I know we've shared a bottle of that before. But yeah, they provided the wine for that party. We had a good time. Do you feel like wine has also been able to bring you together with people? I know the martial arts, you know, having that club, that community. Do you feel like that's done that for you as well?
Well, it's funny because, having that knowledge and expertise over time, and I say expertise, and the reality is I just know a little bit more than your average person, right?
You're this guy at the restaurant.
Yeah. Well, to a point, but everybody should be if they're doing it right. But the whole point of wine is to bring people together, right? So early, like one thing I've been able to do is to help impart what little knowledge I've been able to hold on to over the years to friends. And so, like you said, you're a wine guy, and so it's as I hear stories from some of my other friends over time, like people, traveling for work and sales, like they're all known now in part because what I was able to share with them, that like they're the ones that pick out the wine for the table. Like they go, they'd be like, let Andrew pick because he knows more about wine than us. So,
because I just regurgitated the one thing I remembered from my wine moment with Scott Shubert.
Right, exactly. But so, again, for me, it's more of a, like, I love the taste of it. I wish there wasn't alcohol in it so I could just drink it and not worry about ramifications, with it. But I don't feel like it would have the same, flavor structure to it.
Yeah.
As far as that goes. But it's, but yeah, I mean, wine's meant to bring people together.
Absolutely. It's kind of like, I was with somebody the other day. I'm not going to say names, but they ordered a mock Bloody Mary.
Yes.
This is like a Bloody Mary without the vodka in it or whatever you used to make it. And I was like, I mean, I've had some pretty delicious Bloody Marys, but I feel like you need the vodka in there, right? I don't know. Like a strawberry daiquiri, I get. Like a cold frozen strawberry drink is good, but
I guess, I would say in general, that just kind of depends, right? And I would say growing, when we're younger, partying and things like that were, important.
Yeah.
As I've gotten older, as my faith has changed me a little bit, those things aren't so important anymore. In fact, I was going to actually give an example of, like in a Bloody Mary, the tomato juice is so strong. I don't know that you do need. I think you can enjoy a Bloody Mary without having that in it. You know what I mean? It's just kind of like you got to put a lot of vodka in there to taste it.
Yeah, I know.
From that perspective. So it's just kind of one of those things where it is interesting to me as, we all evolve over time with that aspect to it. And that's just one of those areas that I've just try to pay attention to.
Yeah.
It's like it's not the most important thing to me, but doing that, enjoying high quality, not quantity, I guess is the point of that.
That makes sense. Is there any vineyards around here that you really like a lot?
Jolo does a really good job. They're not too far. They're just a little bit north of Winston, right at the base of the mountain area there. They do a good job with their wines and the atmosphere there, and it's a good restaurant on tap there.
Yeah, been there once before. It's a cool little spot.
Yeah, for the type of wines I like, most wineries around here, they're just North Carolina. Historically, it's much different, like in the Yadkin Valley, as far as being able to grow. We'll call them your normal grapes, like Cabernet and Chardonnay and things like that. But our soil structure and everything like that, tend to grapes like Scuppernong and Muscadine, which is a much sweeter varietal. So I don't drink a ton of that. So but over it's been a while now where the wines that are grown here locally are now proving to be of, much better, higher quality, where, 10, 15 years ago it was a little shifty.
Toilet wine action.
It wasn't great.
Well, flip the most expensive. I'm going to the store. I don't want to spend more than $15-20 on a bottle of wine. Do you have a go-to that you'd be like, man, like this is good price, good for the money?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few like that. Like Bogle does a really good job with a lot of their wines. So like their Petite Syrah and there are a few others. Like Castle Rock Pinot is usually pretty good. That's probably gone up in price, probably closer to 20 now. But regardless of what the price is, this is really where, for me, the most important thing is that you drink what you like.
Yeah.
So a little experimenting, go to a wine shop that will ask you the right questions, not just try to sell you what they want to sell you. And then, if they ask you the right questions about your palate and what you like, then they can help pick you out some wines. And then again, budget shouldn't matter. There's enough wines out there, which again, the good thing is there's enough wines out there that you should be able to find something you like in whatever your budget is, but there's so many that it's hard to know. Right.
Yeah.
And of course there's going to be, there's going to be a lot of wines at $8 that you're probably not going to like. So finding the ones that you do, if that's your budget, it's hard to, it's hard to get there sometimes. But
I know it's not wine, but on that budget conversation, my wife and I have collected bourbons and big bourbon drinkers. And to your point, it's sometimes in life, it's been more about the quantity, not the quality. But now I feel like we're at a point in life where the quality, whether having one or two with a friend at dinner, is more important than the quantity. And my favorite, what you call bottom shelf, whatever you want to call it, for less than $10. Do you know what the name of it is?
Is it Benchmark?
It is Benchmark. Benchmark Bourbon. I mean, bourbon. Benchmark
Borgage?
Bourbon. I can't talk. Bourbon. Roads. Anyway.
Yep. Yeah, that is a good one if you're doing old fashions and things, because it's not so expensive that you feel like you're ruining it by not drinking it, neat or on the rocks. But
I've always that you bring up a good point, and we've gotten off subject, and that's okay. We've done a good job staying on subject. If y'all listen to one of me and his phone conversations, which our wives have to do often, it starts with a point, and 30 minutes later, there's what are we talking about?
A few tangents.
Yeah,
a few tangents.
I love it. It's one of the favorite parts of my day. So shifting gears a little bit. I know that, like a lot of people that do a lot for their communities, kind of like a silent hero. A lot of people don't necessarily like to be, oh, look at me, I'm out there doing that. So understanding that that's kind of your mentality. It's more about what you're doing, not about talking about what you're doing or people seeing you doing it. What are some of the things that you've done over the years and passionate about as far as giving back to the community?
Yeah, I think no matter where you're at, it is, none of us can do it alone. And so if you have talents that you can share with others, and whether that be, the homeless community, some nonprofit or something along those lines, that, we owe it to ourselves and our community to be supportive somehow. And that's going to depend on each person. Some people may not have the monetary means to help fund somebody, but they have great skills to be able to help out.
Yeah.
And so doing that, and vice versa. Somebody they just might not be wired that way. Like, look, yeah, I want to help such and such. I want to help animals. I want to do whatever, but you know what I'm really good at? I'm really good at writing a check.
Yeah.
So I think first understanding what you're good at from that perspective is important. And there's other aspects of that where I think for me personally, like I've fallen into both camps over time. There's been times where we've had so much going on, you didn't have time to do it, but are you, can you help financially? And so I've been to there, through different charities, through when whatever church we were a part of. And then others like here, in Greensboro years ago, we did a lot of work with, Under the Bridge, the church Under the Bridge ministry. Every Saturday night, I think they're still doing it as far as I know, where there's a very brief message and then they feed, the homeless, and it's basically literally under the bridge. So it's, it's a kind of a pop-up thing. So, more than, specifics on, other than that, I just, I would just encourage everyone to really do a little self-examination to see like, who can I help and how can I help?
Yeah.
And then, for me, and it's easy to get lulled into this sometimes, but, you think about helping, but then you don't help because you got busy. And so that's just because you had the good intention of helping. And if you don't actually do it, then it's just the same as not giving a crap in the end. Right. So sometimes the action of it matters. And whether that means, making sure you make that donation, making sure that you, again, if you don't have the funds, but you can spend 3 hours on a Saturday to go do X with something that's near to your heart. That's important.
Well, I think you hit on something that we analyze as business owners too. We try, we try to put people in position of strengths, and by strengths, it's not always just what they're good at. It's what do they enjoy doing? What are they passionate about? What are they going to wake up and want to do every day? And how can I put them in that spot? Because that's what's going to energize them. And I never really thought about giving back to the community from that facet. Like if I'm passionate about something and I want to help them do that, and the one thing that they need or that I can help them do is something that is like nails on a chalkboard to me, I'm not going to be as inclined to show up for that. I'm going to get busy. This is going to get in the way. And then ultimately, to your point, I've done nothing. So knowing what I'm good at, if I go to that organization, that person, and say, hey, I want to help. Here's my strengths. How can that fall into what you're trying to accomplish? If that is simply, hey, it sounds like the best thing you can do for us is just write us a check. I'm happy to do that. But then I know I'm helping, but I'm helping in the best way that I can. Or, you're good at planning. Okay, maybe not so much the execution, but if you have a task, you can plan it. Well, we got a lot of people that can execute. We have some people that lack in planning. Can you help us plan?
Sure.
Yeah, I'll be happy to help you plan it.
Well, and like to your point, if you're doing something like that that's supposed to be good and all it does is drive you crazy, you're going to begin to resent that activity, that organization, and will probably ultimately have the opposite effect. Because, and the truth is too, when we give and when we, donate our time, the people that get usually, feel, good about, the getting part, but really the giver is usually gets so much more out of it than the people that you're actually giving to.
Yeah.
From an internal standpoint.
Well said, sir. Well said. Well, a couple last minute rapid fire questions for you, and then we'll wrap. If you could go back and tell 2003 Scott one thing, what would it be?
Believe in yourself.
Fair enough. Martial arts versus mortgage rates. Which is harder to predict?
Predict? We'll say mortgage rates.
Mortgage rates?
Mortgage rates will be much harder to predict because you don't know which way it's going. But if you put in the time in martial arts and you have the desire, then you will certainly get things out of it and, improve. Whereas we might try really hard, but none of us have control over what's going to happen.
Fair enough.
With the mortgage rate world.
Yeah. Craziest deal that fell through and why?
Craziest deal that fell through and why? That would be day before closing, a water pipe burst and the entire living room flooded.
Always fun.
So they canceled that contract. And then ironically, 2 months later, after they fixed it all up, we did the loan for the buyer that bought that exact same house.
So you were destined to write the loan on that house.
Apparently so.
That's too funny. Did you still work with the other people that terminated then as well?
Yeah, they found something. They found a different house later, but it was just one of those where they were a little jaded.
I got you.
On that one house at that time. But it's not like the sellers did anything wrong or anything. It just kind of was just like, holy cow.
Nice. All right, Scott. Thanks again, buddy. All jokes aside, I love you.
Love you too.
You're so much more than just a mortgage broker to me. Our relationship started as a business relationship, and it's turned into so much more. And you truly are a big part of my life. And thank you for taking some time to come and be on the podcast and talk about yourself and past and your business. You've built a great business, great life, solid reputation in the community. One piece of advice you can give to somebody kind of starting that facet of life or business?
I think use the resources around you. When I do look back at when we, were again going out on our own, and whether it's through these coaches and things that you can have, but make sure that you the people that you're listening to aren't just something shiny syndrome, that they're actually people that you're following good advice. We can't. We're not going to make it up on the spot type thing. So you do have to learn from people along the way. And we've been blessed with some great mentors from that perspective. So, I think that's the biggest thing. Find someone who's done it that and trust, and try to be like them.
Yeah, you've always mentioned to me, be always trying to be in the right room, right?
Sure.
And so that's great. So yeah, hypothetical. Last question. I would say that most people would look at me and look at you and be like, well, Andrew's a little bit bigger than Scott, right? A little bit bigger. With your martial arts background, if I attempted to shove you in the parking lot, what would the outcome be? And would I like it?
If you were simply shoving me in the parking lot, I would probably just back up and get in the car and drive away. However, if you're painting the picture of if it was if I was cornered and there was no other way out, no, you would not like your life for the 5 minutes after I got done with you.
5 minutes. I would think like 10 seconds.
No, I'm saying you wouldn't like your life for the next 5 minutes.
Oh, you're talking. Yeah, the action may only take 10 seconds, but how I felt would extend
Correct.
much longer. Okay, I got you now. All right. Well, episode 16, Behind the Gate. Thank you so much again for being here, Scott. Benchmark Mortgage, y'all. If you get a chance or you're thinking about a home loan, he is the freaking man. I know from experience. I can tell you right now, nobody would personally touch my mortgage unless he told me that somebody else needed to touch my mortgage for some reason or another. But anyway, thanks again for being here, bud.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah.
Appreciate it so much.